Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. Today I want to go through my top high conviction buys for 9.8 comic books right now. And if you're familiar with the stock market, Goldman Sachs, they come out with like a high conviction buy list a couple times a year where their analysts will just recommend like their favorite stocks of the moment kind of thing to buy. So this is just like a 9.8 comic book version of that type of idea. And I think it's a really good list if you're a serious collector investor out there. Like a scenario of a serious investor collector, I would say is, maybe you've saved up some money in the stock market, or you got like a lot of equity in your home or whatever it might be. And you take $20,000 out and you want to buy all those like great 1980s and 1990s comics that you may have loved growing up in the super high grade 9.8. That's a similar experience to like what I did in about 2018. And luckily, I was able to kind of grab a lot of the keys that I wanted, that I really loved growing up. So just some great ideas for the serious collector on this list. So let's dive right in. First one, Amazing Spider-Man 300 in a 9.8. Yeah, kind of an easy one to pick on a high conviction buy list, I think. For late 1980s books, this could be like the top of the mountain for 9.8 comics. First full appearance of Venom. Great Todd McFarlane cover, origin and first full appearance of Venom. Yeah, this cover's just been homaged a zillion times, so it's still really in pop culture, which, it's so popular within the comic book community still, which I think matters over time. 1,341 9.8s in a blue label. So yeah, when I got into things in 2018, there was less than 1,000 of them. So 1,341 in the blue label, universal label 9.8, 5.2% is the 9.8 ratio. So all the graded copies sent to CGC, only 5.2% of them come back as 9.8, so it's really hard to get it in the super high grade. Recent price, $4,900, $4,475 I saw an auction in an old case one. White pages though popped up in Canada as well, so might have held that price back a little bit. That's the lowest I saw them go recently, $4,475. $4,900 another one. I saw the newsstand version of this one sell for $12,000. That was about a month and a half ago, I would say, on Comic Link. And about a year and a half ago, when the comic book market was on fire, a few of those had went over $20,000. Yeah, there was one I think was like $22,000 or $23,000. So it just gives you an idea of how much things have cooled down. But yeah, kind of an easy book to have a high conviction on with it, in a 9.8, especially with that low ratio. Big first appearance, great cover, just ticks a lot of boxes. It's expensive, but again, if you're a serious collector. It's done well over time. Like I have two of them in a 9.8. I picked them up. One was a little over 2,000. One was just under 2,000. This one was just under 2,000. Got a really good deal on it. So, the comic book market has really cooled down. They're still kind of knocking on the $5,000 US door. So they're trending upward, and I think that'll continue. Okay, next one. A Star Wars #1. Yeah, another one that's kind of a no-brainer. You can't go wrong grabbing this one. Recent sales prices in a 9.8 for this one, $4,650, $4,850. We documented an off-white to white page one that went for $4,000 in an auction. But I purchased mine it was 2019, I believe, probably early 2019 for $930 something. So, gives you an idea how this one is absolutely trending up. And it ticks so many boxes as well. Star Wars, probably one of the biggest brands out there, just hands down, period. Big first appearances in this one, yeah, Luke, Leia, and Darth Vader. And actually, for a 1977 comic book, it's pretty easy to find in a top grade, or semi-easy, given that it was really popular and pretty well printed for a kind of a mid-70s book. There's 723 9.8s in a blue label. 5.6% is the 9.8 ratio. So still one, with 723 of them out there, you can still kind of get them somewhat easy. And but just a great one to have in the super high grade because of big brand, and great one to collect that you can, Star Wars is going to be around for 100 years, and that's just going to be a good one to have. And yeah, the prices, as I mentioned, have been trending up, and I would expect that to continue. Okay, next one. Amazing Spider-Man 252. First appearance of the black costume with the first appearance of Spider-Man, kind of Amazing Fantasy 15 cover homage, which I think is really cool too. You kind of get a little taste of the first appearance of Spider-Man on an Amazing Spider-Man 252. I saw a recent sale on this one in a direct edition. This is the newsstand edition. I do have a direct edition of this one too in a 9.8. Yeah, this is just one to want. Direct edition, $1,501. I think the newsstands are about $2,200 or so. Amazing Spider-Man 252, 1,511, 9.8 in a blue label. 8.8%, the 9.8 ratio. This was over 10%. It wasn't, the lower the better with the ratios. This was over 10% when I got into things in 2018, 2019, so ticking down over time. So Amazing Spider-Man 252 is absolutely one to think about. Amazing Spider-Man books, whether it's 252 or Amazing Spider-Man 238, first full appearance of Hobgoblin, because this one's got the tattoos. It's really tough in a super high grade, so this might be another one to go after if you're serious about things. And what is it? Amazing Spider-Man 194. So 238 is about 2,500 US dollars. Maybe, I think 2,700. I saw one recently sell for in the last few weeks on 238. Amazing Spider-Man 194's first appearance of Black Cat. That's a great one too. I think that's around that $4,000 level. So I feel these Amazing Spider-Man books are kind of no-brainers, and that's three of them that you can consider kind of based on what your personal preference might be. Okay, next one, Batman 423, and we'll go for kind of a 2-for-1 on this quickly. Incredible Hulk 340. I think these are kind of the two big Todd McFarlane books, along with Amazing Spider-Man 300, to really go after in a 9.8 if you're a big Todd McFarlane fan. And Batman 423 has done so well, just has surprised me so much. I have two of them in a 9.8. I bought them for about $450 US in 2018, and in 2019 I think one of them was. Recent sale, $2,700 US. And there were a couple that had went around 3,000, 3,200, I think, even during like the Batman movie time. So they've cooled down a little bit, but still 2,700 is just kind of blew away all my expectations on a Batman 423. But you can kind of understand it. 239.8, it's a 1 of 230. Yeah, given how popular this book has been in the last couple years, I'm surprised like there hasn't been so many graded, and now there's like 300 or 400 in a 9.8. It just goes to show you it's tough in the super high grade. 8.7% is the 9.8 ratio. So of all the graded copies sent to CGC, only 8.7% of them are 9.8s, which is fantastic. So 2,700, maybe this one could cool down just a little bit. It's just went on kind of that epic run up to $3,000. Maybe you wait for kind of 2,500, a little bit under on a Batman 423 if you really like that one. But as a big Batman fan and a huge Todd McFarlane fan, that's just the one to get for sure. All right, next one's maybe a bit of a under the radar kind of pick, but it's Simpsons Comics and Stories #1 in a 9.8. First appearance of Simpsons in comic books. I really like this kind of Bartman, Batman cover as well. And this one is kind of cooling down a little bit. It went on a pretty epic run in the last year and a half, let's say. Recent sales in the sort of $600 to $700 range. Interesting, there's actually one on eBay right now for $699.99. I noticed there's like, I think it's the top, what is it, left corner, like along the spine, kind of has a little bit of a fluff, so it might not be the best looking 9.8, but I'm pretty sure a few of them had sold recently for around $699. And if you go back a little bit, 3 to 6 months ago, this one got really hot and they were selling around the $900 level. Oh, we'll have to decline that for now. That's okay. Yeah, this one's just cooling off a little bit, making more sense into that $600 to $700 price range in a 9.8. And yeah, I mentioned like went on a pretty epic run. I remember these under $400 about a year ago. Oh, someone wants to get a hold of me. About a year ago, went all the way up to 900. I think around 600 to 700. This one's a cool one. A 171 9.8s in a blue label. A 1 of 171 is a pretty great collector item if you're a big Simpsons fan. 13.9%, the 9.8 ratio. So hopefully like a little bit closer to 600, I think, is sounding like a good deal on a Simpsons Comics and Stories #1 in a 9.8. Next one is a G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, #1. Sort of a 2-for-1 on this one. I know we talked recently on a video about Transformers #1. These were kind of like toys before they were comic books, but ended up really being very popular franchises, and these books have done well over time as far as, you know, trending up values in a 9.8. We'll focus on G.I. Joe, #1 right now. 805 9.8s in that one, 15.1%. The 9.8 ratio. Recent prices 1,251, 1,353. So yeah, right around the $1,250 price is kind of the fair value on a G.I. Joe, Real American Hero #1. I think Transformers 1 in a 9.8 is about, you know, 1,700. I think maybe one of those might have cooled down to 1,500, but that one's probably worth about 1,700 if it's looking great in a first print 9.8 white pages. So those are 2 to target if you're serious. Yeah, I got a CGC 9.8 in the G.I. Joe 1 and a CBCS 9.8 Transformers 1. Next one is Batman Beyond #1 in a 9.8. So yeah, I think this is kind of the preferred sort of new Batman, you know, first appearance book to get. On top of that, it's a really tough one in the high grade. It came out in 1999. By the late 90s, the comic book printing really started to cool down. This one wasn't printed very much, and it's kind of like a Fox Kids book, so I feel like people probably weren't keeping these in the highest top grade condition. So for that reason, there's not too many of them for a big first appearance of Batman Beyond. It's really got a big cult of following as well, Batman Beyond. There's 402 9.8s in a blue label, 26.4%. The 9.8 ratio. The ratio is pretty good for like a modern book that has come out around this time. And 1,699 was a recent price on Batman Beyond #1. And I've mentioned in the past, like, this one's really hanging in there. You know, price-wise, I have 2 of these in a 9.8. I pretty much bought them for about $400, $450 in 2018, 2019. So this is another one that has trended up well. Hanging in there. It was over 2,000 when the market was really hot. So if you want to be strategic, though, this one might get under 1,500. You know, a little closer to 1,500 I'd probably aim for on a Batman Beyond #1 if you wanted that one in the first print. Okay, the next one is Uncanny X-Men 141. And to be honest, you could consider any kind of, you know, Uncanny X-Men key issue from this John Byrne era of X-Men. It's just a great era of comic books to buy in a 9.8. X-Men 141 is actually on the affordable end of things kind of during this generation. I saw one recently sell for $810 in a 9.8. I think that's a pretty good value for this one. It's like the first appearance of the alternate future X-Men, and you know, this is one of the earlier kind of time traveling stories, like multiverse time traveling stories. So I think for that it kind of sticks out as a pretty huge key. And yeah, Days of Future Past was like the X-Men story in the 80s. That was like the most popular. I do have this one in a 9.8, but maybe consider, if you're really serious, X-Men 129. That's probably the 9.8 to get from this generation. It's really tough in a super high grade 9.8, and they sell for about $4,000. Yeah, I think a little bit over 4,000 for a really nice one, and the newsstands get up to like 5,000. So if you're really serious about things, first Kitty Pryde. And I think it's Emma Frost, the White Queen. I might be mixing that up, but Sebastian Shaw as well. Yeah, and Uncanny X-Men 129. So for 141, though, Days of Future Past, 744 9.8s in a blue label. Much easier to find and get than 129. 12.7% is the 9.8 ratio, and the fair value on that one's around $800. I would say is a pretty decent deal on that one. And next one is DC Comics Presents 26, the first appearance of the new Teen Titans in preview by George Perez and Marv Wolfman. This is just, yeah, one of those big George Perez keys. And so interesting. A recent sale on this one in a fire sale auction in a direct edition. The centering maybe wasn't the best, but $915. So, this is one I've recommended quite often, and, maybe I underestimated that, like, Titans show was pretty awesome and people loved it, and it is a pretty great show. It's really gritty, and people were really into that show. This book really heated up during that time, and I think, that show's been out for a while. We're just on the other end of that, and this one is cooling down quite a bit, $915 US. So it'll be pretty tough to get this one under $1,000, I think. Great looking one in a 9.8 white pages, but if you can, that would be great. I think it's a really good value. This one was right around the $2,000 level a year and a half ago, when the comic book market was a lot hotter, admittedly. There's 512 9.8s in a blue label, 12.8%. So pretty good collector item, especially with the cooling down price recently. And that's a big DC key that you can, I think, have a high conviction buying right now, for sure. Okay, a last one, and I got a bunch of honorable mentions as well, but in the top 10, Batman Adventures number 12 in a 9.8. Yeah, this is just a no-brainer for a 1990s comic book. It's a really tough comic book in a high grade. It's a 13.8% is the 9.8 ratio, which this is into the 90s, so the ratios don't look as good as the 1980s, but for a 1990s comic book, 13.8% of all graded copies are 9.8 is an awesome, toughness in the super high grade. There's a 1,059 in the 9.8 in the blue label, so it ticked over 1,000 of them. This was always one that there was less than 1,000 in the 9.8. So recent prices, $2,605. And I saw one sell recently about a week ago for $3,000. It was looking pretty good in a direct edition, nice centering, and kind of looked flawless, to be honest. So that's the kind of price range I would say. $3,000 for a really nice one, $2,605. And yeah, Batman Adventures 12, first appearance of Harley Quinn, and it's like the Fox Kids book. So I feel like at the time, kids were like coloring in them and stuff like that, and it was kind of a cartoony, book. So I don't think people were trying to keep them in super high grade, and over time it is a really tough one in the high grade. So yeah, Batman Adventures 12 is one to think about if you're serious. Okay, honorable mentions. Nova number 1 from 1976 in a 9.8. Yeah, I saw a recent auction on this one at a really good price. It was $1,675. And, like a lot of the MCU spec has really just bombed, and I wouldn't buy this one because it's coming out in the MCU or anything like that. But if something does, if Nova kind of surprises everyone, and there is something, there has been some Nova things teased, and who knows if the MCU will kind of follow through on that. But, Nova's always kind of coinciding with Guardians of the Galaxies, and they've been such a hit on the big screen. So, yeah, I think Nova could do well on, in the MCU, although a lot of the recent MCU stuff has not done so well. But 1,675, yeah, they were about 2,000. This was definitely over 2,000 when the market was a lot hotter. Like, they were 2,300, 2,500. So just one to think about buying. Still pretty expensive, but if you're serious, at 1,675, much better than buying like a year ago for 2,500. And an old one that you could still get in the high grade. That's a great collector item, I think. Okay, next is Ultimate Fallout number 4 in a 9.8. Yeah, I've been sort of waiting and seeing how, this one's just been kind of grinding lower and lower, and it's been on a roller coaster though, where I purchased mine in 2019 for $360, and they went all the way up to like $3,000. I think they were even over $3,000 for a bit. We've made quite a few videos documenting how it cooled down to kind of 2,500. I was a bit on the fence at that point, like thinking maybe you might want to buy, but recent prices, $2,270 and $2,075. So it's just cooling down a little bit more. I do like this one in a 9.8 too. It's got a pretty great ratio. There is a lot of them though. It is basically the most popular modern comic book, so you got to kind of remember that. There is going to be a lot in the 9.8. But if I didn't have this one in a 9.8, I would probably be more inclined to maybe buy now around the $2,000 level. Maybe it goes a little bit lower, but then those 2 Spider-Verse movies are going to be coming out. So, if you kind of been waiting and you didn't want to buy around 3,000 and then it went lower and lower, probably around 2,000 is a decent time to buy this one with the first appearance of the new Spider-Man. Miles Morales, pretty huge key in the modern age. Okay, next honorable mention is Wolverine Limited Series, #1. And first solo titled Wolverine comic book, classic Frank Miller cover. Recent sales around this, right around $700 in a 9.8. X-Men 133 as well is, we documented a couple of these recently. They sell kind of right in the 1,400, 1,500 area. And that's the first solo Wolverine story with the cool Wolverine cover that predates Wolverine Limited Series, but these are kind of the two solo Wolverine books that you really just can't go wrong on. Next one is Punisher Limited Series #1. Yeah, very similar to Wolverine Limited Series, except Punisher Limited Series #1 is there's way less of them in the 9.8 than Wolverine Limited Series #1, and it's got a better ratio as well. So it's just a better overall 9.8. One recently sold for $1,000. Yeah, and I think it's probably worth about 1,100, 1,200. It's way tougher in a 9.8 than Wolverine Limited Series. So, even though Wolverine's probably maybe cooler than Punisher, it's the Wolverine Limited Series are $700, but the Punisher Limited Series have always been more, and it is a better collector item. Around $1,000, I think, would be a great price on that one. Spawn #1 in the newsstand. Yeah, Spawn, just a big first appearance of like a hero that, hopefully they come out with that Spawn movie at some point, but Spawn has that potential, I think, to get into pop culture a little bit more, and then the popularity would kind of ratchet up, and hopefully the prices of a Spawn one. In the newsstand edition, I always recommend too, because the direct editions were just, like there was 1.7 million Spawn #1s printed. So you get the more rare newsstand edition. Recent sales, $769, $809. And I think one had sold recently around the 900 level. They were sort of in the 900 to 1,000 level for quite a while. Noticed about 3 months ago that they, weakness into the 769. And to be honest, I'm kind of on the lookout to kind of buy around the 750 level, 800 maybe. So yeah, Spawn #1, a big first appearance in that newsstand version. And hopefully Spawn gets a push here in pop culture. And if you're really serious about Spawn #1 black and white in a 9.8. That's the reprint of Spawn #1 that came out in the late 90s. That was very low printed, and I think that one's like 2,300 or so in the 9.8. And then there's Malibu Sun 13, which is the first appearance of Spawn in an advertisement in Malibu Sun 13. There's only about 30 of those in a 9.8 blue label, and they're, I think, about $3,000. You do well to get under 3,000, I think, on a Malibu Sun 13 in a 9.8. So next one, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in the 4th printing 9.8. I saw a recent price on this one. It was on Comic Link in an auction, sold for $525. There were quite a few of these that had sold over $1,000 about a year and a half ago when the comic book market was hotter. So this one has just cooled down so much. I don't mind the 4th print of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1. I think right around $500, it's a great buy. Also consider Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures #1 with like first Bebop, Rocksteady, and Krang. Also get the first appearance, it's kind of underrated, I think, of the 4-colored bandana Ninja Turtles. Before that, it was all red bandanas they all had, but to kind of differentiate them for the kids on the cartoon, they did the 4 colors, or each of them having the different color, and that kind of stuck over time, obviously. And last one is Batman The Dark Knight Returns #1. Yeah, this is just one of those kind of big no-brainer Batman key issues that's really cooling down after the Batman movie. And there are about a couple recent sales, 1,105 and 1,150. And you may even want to consider like a Vengeance of Bane, Batman Vengeance of Bane. That one's really cooling down as well. Seeing some sell around the $400 level. And I think right around $400, that one's showing some really good value. It was like $575 for a really long time leading into the Batman movie and everything like that. So yeah, the Batman Vengeance of Bane right around 400 in a 9.8 looking great. It would be a great one as well. Okay, so just wanted to go through some really big key issues. I think I mentioned it in the last video, but even though prices are cooling down for everything, it's kind of tempting to maybe go after like a secondary key issue or something like that, but you can almost never go wrong going after big keys, especially in that scenario that we talked about at the beginning of the video. If you're really serious about investing in 9.8 Comics. These are the kind of books that you want to just get out of the way right away. You don't want to overthink things at the beginning. You just want to pick off like those big keys that are gonna trend up, well over time. And even though there's been a pretty tough market in the last year or so, yeah, I've elaborated a bit on some of the values I paid in 2018 and 2019. So if you do have that long-term time horizon on these just big popular books, I think you'll do really well. So it's kind of easy to have a high conviction on these ones. Okay, yeah, we'll leave it at that, team. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.